I'm Bob Patrick. I have some earthquake information that may not have trickled down to you. There are 3 related briefings. In each, the examples are chosen for those who live or do business on the west coast of LA County, inland on the plain, or in the San Fernando Valley. If you see one version and do business or have family in another part of town, you go to YouTube for the other material. I have been researching earthquake effects for over 20 years. I first published a paper on earthquake effects in 1990 when I was a consultant to the Rand Corporation in Santa Monica. Since then, a lot has been learned, but not much has been properly presented to the public. Let me make one thing abundantly clear. While you can't do anything to prevent Mother Nature from causing an earthquake, there is quite a bit you can do to reduce your risk of injury and expense. I classify earthquakes based on community impact. A local quake is a small quake handled by local resources. A community quake is a medium quake needing mutual aid from surrounding communities. A regional quake is a large quake that requires state and federal help. When a regional quake hits, it destroys the infrastructure near the epicenter. Gone or damaged are the lifeline utilities, the transportation network, communication systems, and the logistics systems. That is, food, fuel, medicines, and waste disposal. Later, finance and construction will be impacted. The impact of a quake on the building you are in at the time of the quake is a function of 7 factors. 1 is the Richter magnitude and the depth to the epicenter. That's the energy. 2 is the distance the building of interest is from the epicenter. 3, the type of soil into the building. 4, the number of stories the building had. 5, the type of construction of any buildings immediately adjacent. And 6, the construction used in the building of interest. And if the building is not circular, the way it is oriented to the shock wave. If you're right over the epicenter of a big quake, the building you are in will be heavily damaged and you could be seriously injured. If you're some distance away, depending on the 7 factors just listed, you may reduce your earthquake loss and injury by doing some preparation. Quakes can occur at any time, on any day, in any season, and are not triggered by sun, moon, temperature, moisture, or political persuasion. Spans of a couple of 100 years are of current interest. This is a map showing the earthquake faults under Southern California. This map is a little dated since they've found additional faults since it was printed. These faults look like the veins in your eye after a night of hard drinking. Here is the San Andreas. The southern half of the San Andreas runs from Parkfield almost to the Mexican border. The last time it moved massively was the Fort Tejon quake in 1857. That quake is estimated at a 7.9 magnitude, and the rent in the Earth's surface was 220 miles long. In 2008, the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, said, "Get ready, it's going to move again." The USGS has published a scenario that postulates a 7.5 magnitude quake on the San Andreas Fault centered at Salton Sea. Here are some cost estimates from that estimate. The location of the whole document is contained in a reference I will give you later. In addition to the cost of the predicted quake, They say business will be interrupted for at least 6 months. Think of damage from a big quake as a series of rings. Over the epicenter, total destruction. In the next ring, partial devastation with some buildings standing and some buildings heavily damaged. If you go far enough from the epicenter, there will be buildings standing with their contents all over the floor. The USGS notes that LA's utilities all crossed the fault and are likely to be damaged. Since power is required to pump fuel and fuel tankers need clear roads, running out of gas will be a common problem. Running out of food will follow. Not all hospitals will survive, and those that do may not be fully staffed. There is no provision to expedite vehicles driven by medical people or medicines, water, and fuel to those hospitals that are in full operation. It doesn't take much to imagine a family loading an injured member into a car and fighting traffic to a hospital to find it not in full operation or closed. In 1992, a quake at Landers, out in the desert, taught us that adjacent faults that seem unconnected can fail in sequence and produce a 7.3 magnitude quake. The biggest worry we have is the Newport-Inglewood fault, which runs from Long Beach to UCLA. There are also faults offshore. The USGS borrowed the research submarine Alvin and found recent activity not too far off the coast. If that fault moves, it could result in a tsunami with little or no warning. In 2009, UCLA did a residential quake readiness survey. These are highlights from that survey. The location of the whole document I'll give to you later. As you can see from their findings, we have been misled by the propaganda we have heard over the years, and we are not ready. Interestingly, only 17% of the homes carry quake insurance. Most of you are probably aware of the danger from unreinforced masonry construction. If you do business next to a weak building, you could also be in danger. This shows damage from a 1983 6.7 magnitude quake in Coalinga, a little town up northeast of Paso Robles. It occurred on an unknown fault. Note the tall building failed and destroyed a short building right next door. In the 1983 Coalinga quake, a two-story building fell down on the structure next door. Some overzealous firemen pulled down a dangerous wall and crushed a jewelry store without salvaging the valuables first, and only half of the businesses survived 5 years later. In 2003, there was a quake at San Simeon that damaged a building in Paso Robles. 2 women were killed. There was a civil suit. The trial court found the building owner was liable since he knew the building was weak. The appeal court upheld the trial court decision. Quake-wise, it is meaningful to think of inland as being from the 405 freeway on the west to San Bernardino on the east, and from the mountains in the north to the harbor area in the south. LA and several dozen smaller cities occupy this vast area. Some utilities are provided by the cities and some are provided by giant corporations. Coordination after a quake will be time-consuming, and the sharing of supplies to restore service will be lengthy. In addition, the area is crisscrossed by freeways and cut into chunks by the LA River and several flood control channels. Today, These chunks of land have heavy industry, petrochemical, a lot of light industry, and a few million unprepared people. Commuters drive the freeways, and most don't know alternate routes. Citizens range from the well-to-do, who could be prepared if they wished, to the unemployed and the day laborers who have no spare money to invest in food or preparations. Then, of course, we have ethnic neighborhoods who have beliefs and practices which either strongly encourage preparations or depend on some deity to solve the larger problems. All of this yields an enormous spectrum of challenges to be faced by a government trying to plan for an emergency whose time of occurrence and location are unpredictable. Some years ago, the federal government devised an emergency management system and induced all local agencies to use it. In addition, jurisdictions within the state of California have agreed to help each other with a series of mutual aid agreements where a city with a problem that overwhelms its resources can immediately get help from surrounding cities whose resources are not fully committed. This works, and we see it every day when they fight wildfires and/or civil emergencies. However, both of these management methods are likely to break down if a big quake postulated by the 2008 USGS scenario actually occurs. Such a big event could have hundreds of locations within the metropolis simultaneously calling for help, and no city will have men or equipment to spare. The USGS scenario predicts that we could have hospitals that are not in full operation or are out of service, more fires than we have equipment, roadways damaged, mainly bridges, and a variety of utilities out of service, some for lengthy periods. In addition, there will be instantaneous loss of communications, either by damage or overload, no electric power, and eventually no water. Due to the lack of electric power, there will be no traffic lights, and that will amplify congestion. Even though fuel may be in underground tanks, we won't be able to pump it without electricity. The freeways will clog, and if you are a commuter, you won't be able to get home. If you don't keep your car's fuel tank at least a quarter full, you may not get home for a few days. I used to commute to my consulting assignments all over LA. My Thomas Brothers Book of Maps was part of my emergency kit. The energy from a quake is transmitted through the earth. Rock transmits the energy efficiently, and the damage is less. On soft soil, motion is amplified. The worst case is soft soil and water. The shaking converts the soil to a slurry and buildings fail. There are several worrisome spots of soft soil down by the harbor, in the Long Beach area, and in the valley. If you live or work in one of these places, you need to take extra precautions. The areas highlighted on this map are expected to be the hardest hit in a big quake. If you live or work in one of these areas, expect the shaking intensity to be quite strong. I would like to mention one spot on the fault map I showed you earlier. The City of Hope is a respected cancer center hospital. It sits in Duarte, just south of the intersection of the 210 freeway and the 605 freeway. It's right next to the San Gabriel River. Just north of it is the Santa Fe Flood Control Basin, and farther up the canyon are 2 reservoirs. Underneath all of this is the Sierra Madre Fault. and only 28 miles north lies the mighty San Andreas. If you travel on the 210 freeway, have an alternate route and watch for flooding, since massive movement on the San Andreas could disturb this area. Fire is a grave danger after a quake. If a house shifts on its foundation and breaks a gas line, fire is one result. If you live up a canyon in the hill country, keep your emergency kit packed. A big quake can damage both the electrical and water supplies. Couple that with more blazes than fire equipment, and you may have to move quickly. Take enough food, clothes, and financial records to file an insurance claim and start over. This is an area picture of the freeway complex fire. This wildfire was not caused by a quake and has had several names. It is now called the Freeway Complex Fire. It occurred in 2008 and it overlapped the boundary between LA and Orange counties. The homes were built up on a ridgeback. 200 structures were burned, partially due to more fire than they had water up on the slopes. If you care to read about it, you can look up Freeway Complex Fire and Google, and you may find that it has the names Yorba Linda, Brea, Diamond Bar, and Triangle Complex associated with it. In passing, it should be noted that a homeowner's insurance policy does not cover quake damage. If a fire takes your home after a quake and you don't have quake insurance, you are left with an argument. According to the State Department of Insurance, only 17% of the homeowners have quake insurance. A retail business survives without damage, but your stock on hand may be all you have for a month or two. Until communications get restored and your suppliers are ready to resume your relationship, you'll get no input. A manufacturing business could be shut down longer, being dependent upon others for supplies, parts, or service. Although you may not be severely damaged, if one of your suppliers was hit hard, you could be in trouble. Further, if you have embraced just-in-time manufacturing scheduling, prepare for a long vacation. The USGS scenario says it could take 6 months to get SoCal up and running after a big quake. Areas with heavy damage may take longer. There is likely to be a shortage of materials for reconstruction and contractors to undertake the necessary work. Finances will be iffy until the banks, their communication systems, and their computers are at least partially restored. The utilities will be restored a neighborhood at a time. Pray the one you are in is on an early schedule. After you get your own business put back together, you need customers, communications, and shipping. Duck, cover, and hold for 72 hours is just the beginning. About this time, you're probably harboring a few questions. If our roles were reversed, I might ask, what if he's wrong? Is he concerned for nothing? To which I would reply, find the USGS scenario, read the summary, and judge for yourself. Next, I would wonder, so he's right and he has the USGS to back him up. What should I do? Well, there are 3 choices. 1, you can pack up and move your home and your business out of earthquake country. 2, you can read the conclusions from the UCLA study of household readiness and see how you stack up against your neighbors. And 3, you can check your earthquake insurance and see if both your home and your business are covered, and then get to work preparing. If you convince yourself that a big quake would disrupt the city, you might want more suggestions than duck, cover, and hold for 72 hours. In that case, go to the internet and Google SoCal Quake Essays. I wrote those essays to give you some ideas that might stimulate you to preparing. Some ideas will not take much effort. Some will be superior to common quake advice. And some will make your heart sink, particularly if you find you have a chimney like the one that broke in two in 1906 and killed the San Francisco fire chief. The earthquake establishment makes a big deal out of building codes. The concept is good, the practice is flawed. A building code is the best the architects and structural engineers can come up with that is politically correct. The codes are updated every 3 years, so there's a built-in time delay. The code changes must be reviewed and adopted by local jurisdictions. Some municipalities adopt each code in total, and some choose what to adopt and when. Excuse me. Codes are not retroactive. If you live or work in a non-complying building, it may not be strengthened until the building is renovated or sold. There are some bad buildings out there. Code enforcement, as shown by the Northridge quake, needs some improvement. Further, there's a list somewhere of items that are too hot to handle. One of these is the evacuation of high-rise buildings without electrical power. On building codes, a good deal of skepticism is in order. Common earthquake advice has been watered down. What do you do after 72 hours? In Japan, the roads weren't even cleared in 72 hours. They say listen to your radio. Some stations don't have generators, so they can't transmit. Others may have physical damage. If the roads are choked and the communication systems that survived are congested, how will reporters get around and then communicate their findings to the station? If you have school-age children, what are your school's plans for the kids? What happens when it gets dark and you are stuck in traffic? The state has concentrated their efforts on the structural safety of buildings. They have not addressed a building's contents. There was a tall test facility in Downey that held a satellite under final test. The building was weak. When the shaking came, it shifted the satellite but did not damage it. The contents were worth many times what the structure was worth. Now, most of you will not be testing a satellite in your backyard, but many of you will visit a large hardware store in the next month or so. These stores have installed steel racks to hold excess inventory. Most of this inventory is overhead and not tied down. A good quake will shake some of this loose and onto the shoppers below. Don't tarry in a big hardware store. Get in, buy, and get out. The USGS scenario says financial loss from contents damage approximates the financial loss from structural damage. Here are a few actions that look prudent wherever you live or do business. Both at home and at work, check your insurance coverage. It takes an extra cost rider to cover quake damage. One statistic says only 17% of the homeowners have quake insurance. At home, Drain the sludge out of your hot water tank, and you and your family will have a reservoir of fresh water. Also, locate the shutoff valve to isolate your tank from the water mains, which might get congested or contaminated. At home, determine how to isolate your home from electrical and gas networks. If you live near the bottom of a hill, determine how to protect your home from sanitary sewer backup. Commuters should resolve to refuel their vehicles when the gauge reads a quarter full. Commuters should also carry an emergency kit. Also carry a book of maps and explore alternate routes. Beware of bridges. At work, ask yourself how to find your car if it is dark and your business has no power. Avoid sidewalks with overhanging building ornamentation, power lines, bridges, and water courses. If the building has no evacuation plan, do one for yourself. Don't use the elevators. At home, continually refresh your supply of food and necessities. Don't get caught with out-of-date canned goods or run out of daily medicines. At home, discuss how to provide for family or neighbors who may need assistance. Old folks, infants, handicapped, and coveys of young children may need help. Retired folks could be part of the solution. Schools need extra attention. A recent report says Sacramento has let some school construction go uninspected. The fact that the school's interiors and contents may not be secure is an open secret within the earthquake community. Some evacuation plans are trash. While school staff are first responders within the school day, some are not prepared at home. It's worth checking since little kids cannot forage for themselves. Both at work and at home, if you see a newspaper article or a TV show that tells the preparedness level for hospitals, make notes. Some hospitals were constructed to the new code, some have been strengthened, and some may suffer significant damage. Hospitals don't advertise their state of readiness. The readiness of pharmacies, labs, clinics, and doctors' offices is not even addressed. You don't want to make an emergency run to a closed facility. At work, if your business is damaged, retrieve the computer. Your business computer contains your accounts receivables, payables, contracts, and customer list. It is the key to restarting your business or filing an insurance claim. Wherever you are, don't depend on your usual communication systems. Power poles are replaced on an as-required basis. One weak pole can isolate a whole neighborhood. Cell towers can sustain damage, and those that survive will saturate and no emergency calls can get through. If you cannot get a dial tone, hang up the phone and take some action. For many more details, read my essays. In summary, the big one is coming. We don't know where or when. All utilities cross the fault. Southern California will be shut down. Fire is likely, and there will be a shortage of equipment and water. Communications will be damaged or saturated or both. If you make it through the initial shaking, there will be shortages of power, transportation, food, fuel, medical, and materials for reconstruction. Good luck.